Good evening, everyone. Welcome to NTD Tonight. I'm David Zhang. Here's a preview of some of today's top stories. The European Union said today they're open to talks on letting Ukraine and Moldova join. The process would take years, but the unanimous consent is the first step. Dozens arrested in a sex trafficking operation. We'll have more on how Las Vegas police conducted the operation leading up to Formula One car races. The search for a cure for breast cancer is underway. One company is now planning phase 2 of clinical trials. Will Ukraine be able to join the European Union? The war-torn nation is now officially on a path to membership.
The EU on Thursday agreed to open membership negotiations with Ukraine. The leaders of EU member states made the decision during a summit in Brussels. Coming out the meeting, the European Council president called this a historic moment.
This is extremely important. We want to support Ukraine. It's a very powerful political signal. It's a very powerful political decision. And today and tonight, I think to the people of Ukraine, we are on their side.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky welcomed the agreement as, quote, a victory for Ukraine, a victory for all of Europe. Thursday's decision doesn't guarantee Ukraine will join the EU, but it's expected to be a boost in morale for the nation during the war with Russia. At the same time, the EU leaders also decided to open membership talks with Ukraine's neighbor, Moldova. They both applied for membership after the war started. The EU currently has 27 member states. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban is the only leader opposed to Ukraine joining the bloc.
We set up 7 preconditions, and in the evaluation of the Commission, 3 out of the 7 is not fulfilled. So therefore, there is no reason to discuss anything, because preconditions were not met.
Countries must meet a set of standards before they can join the EU. The standards cover the rule of law, the economy, political freedom, and more. Membership talks could take many years. There needs to be unanimous consent for a new member to join. Reporting by Allison Lee, NTD News.
Now let's take a look at other national headlines. 7 people, including 4 suspected Hamas members, were arrested in Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands on suspicion of planning attacks on Jewish institutions in Europe. Authorities in the 3 countries said on Thursday. The arrests were made as Israel pressed on with its operation to destroy Hamas in the Gaza Strip, a war that started on October 7th by a cross-border assault on Israeli towns by militants of the Palestinian Islamist movement. 3 of the suspects were detained in Berlin, and another was detained in the Netherlands. All 4 long-standing members of Hamas with close links to the leadership of Hamas military branch, German prosecutors said in a statement. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen called the incident extremely serious and said it's completely unacceptable for someone to bring a conflict elsewhere in the world into Danish society. Police said that they would increase their public presence in coming days, particularly in Copenhagen and around Jewish localities. In the Israel-Hamas war, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan told Israel today that the U.S. would continue to support Israel in its fight against Hamas. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby said that the U.S. backs another pause in the fighting to allow the release of more hostages. On the ground in Gaza, telecommunications were down. Palestinian telecoms providers Paltel and Jawal reported a near-total blackout. Hospitals and medical teams said the service disruptions make it more difficult for them to reach and rescue civilians and wounded people. At the same time, the IDF earlier released a video suggesting that they are taking extensive measures to minimize the civilian casualties. Those steps include offering maps and instructions while urging Gazan civilians to temporarily relocate to safer areas. The House is now officially condemning anti-Semitism on college campuses. Lawmakers passed the bill calling on the presidents of Harvard and MIT to resign. The House passed the bipartisan measure on Wednesday night. The resolution condemns congressional testimony by the former University of Pennsylvania president Liz McGill, MIT leader Sally Kornbluth, and Harvard president Claudine Gay. UPenn's Liz McGill already resigned due to the backlash. All three of them avoided directly saying that the calling for the genocide of Jews violates the school's codes of conduct. Congress has successfully passed the annual budget for the military. It's now waiting for Biden to sign into law. This year's National Defense Authorization Act lays out pathways to begin strengthening U.S. defenses in the event of a military conflict with the Chinese Communist Party. Most notably, the military will have to draft an assessment of the impact a hypothetical war between the U.S. and China in 2030 would have. The assessment would outline key avenues of attack, cyber actions, and threats to infrastructure, as well as the global economic consequences of such a war. It also includes an over 5% pay raise for service members, the largest raise in 2 decades. The bill also allows the Pentagon to use tax dollars to pay for service members traveling for abortions. Pro-Palestinian activists staged a freeway shutdown in Los Angeles and corporate protests in New York, demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. NTD's Stephanie Sekal has the story.
Pro-Palestinian demonstrations took place in Los Angeles and New York. On December 13, protesters in Los Angeles advocated for a Gaza ceasefire, disrupting a major downtown freeway for approximately 1 hour. Exiting their vehicles, they walked across the southbound lanes, forming a human chain. They blocked morning rush hour traffic, leading to confrontations with motorists. The California Highway Patrol detained approximately 75 people. Simultaneously on December 12 in New York, numerous pro-Palestine activist protesters gathered outside the New York Times, Citigroup, and Starbucks, expressing their concerns about these companies' positions on the Israel-Hamas conflict. Carrying Palestinian flags and banners, the crowd loudly called for a ceasefire in Gaza. Stephanie Sekal, NTD News.
Dozens of individuals were arrested in a sex trafficking operation during the week of Las Vegas Grand Prix. Here's NTD's Christina Corona with more.
Over 70 men were arrested in connection with the week-long sex trafficking Operation Sting. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department conducted the operation leading up to the Formula One races.
During this operation, we arrested 36 individuals for pandering, or more commonly known as sex trafficking, 31 people who were trying to purchase sex for money, 7 individuals for luring a child or soliciting a minor. This was part of a covert operation where the sex buyer believed they were meeting an underage victim for sex.
The 7 individuals believed they were meeting with a teenage girl. Records reveal those arrested ranged from 22 to 64 years old. All the defendants currently have active cases in Las Vegas Justice Court, facing a range of sex charges, including solicitation of a child for sexual acts. During the operation, police identified 215 people believed to be victims of sex trafficking, including juveniles.
These are 5 juveniles that were reported as runaways that we came into contact with in various operations, both on the Strip and then in other areas of town, that are running away from a bad situation, and then they're being preyed upon by human traffickers.
To recognize indicators of sex trafficking in anticipation of a week-long operation,
we trained workers at hospitals, airlines, hotels, nightclubs, and multiple community groups to spot the signs of sex trafficking.
Metro collaborated with the Signs of Hope's RISE program, providing resources and support to victims. However, only 10% of them accepted the services during that week. Metro announced that the department is in the process of developing a new initiative against sex trafficking in collaboration with the NFL before Super Bowl 58 on February 11, 2024. Christina Corona, NTD News.
A breast cancer vaccine targeting the most aggressive form of the disease is in early clinical trials. Phase 1 studies currently have shown no significant side effects. NTD's Jason Blair brings us more.
A new vaccine for triple-negative breast cancer, the most aggressive form of breast cancer, just went through phase 1 of early clinical trials. It involved 16 women getting 3 doses over 6 weeks. According to the vaccine developers, Anixa Biosciences, the study showed no major side effects and a good immune response in 75% of the women. The unnamed vaccine is geared towards patients already treated for triple-negative breast cancer to prevent reoccurrence. It instructs the immune system to fight off the tumor to keep it from growing. Phase 2 studies are being planned. And according to the company, if studies go well, the earliest it could be available is in 5 years. Jason Blair, NTD News.
We'll take a short break now, everybody, but here's a look at what we have for you when we come back. In California, the advocacy group wants to make raising taxes more difficult, but the governor and some state lawmakers are now suing. A judge halts an effort allowing young adults to buy rifles in California. He says the state's gun restriction laws will remain in effect as the legal battle continues. Could high-rises be coming to the California coastal town? Local leaders in the city of Santa Cruz share more on their plans. Those stories and more coming up on NTD Tonight. Welcome back to NTD Tonight. I'm your host, David Zhang. California has some of the highest taxes in the country. One advocacy group wants to make it harder to increase them, but Governor Newsom is now bringing a lawsuit.
The California Supreme Court recently agreed to hear a lawsuit filed by Governor Gavin Newsom and some lawmakers seeking to stop a ballot initiative from appearing on the 2024 ballot. The initiative, called the Taxpayer Protection Act, would require voters to approve all tax hikes and increase the minimum number of votes needed by the legislature. The lawsuit skipped the lower courts, with a ruling expected from the California Supreme Court early next year. In a statement to the Epoch Times, Assemblyman James Gallagher said, "Out-of-touch politicians wasting money in an effort to silence their own constituents is exactly why more than 1 million Californians signed on the Taxpayer Protection Act to rein in taxes and spending." California recently announced a potential budget deficit of $68 billion. Lawmakers hoped tax increases would fill the gap. In a statement to the Epoch Times, John Kupal, president of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, said, "Californians are fed up with taxation. We are seeking to return some sanity to California's politics, especially as it relates to taxation." A poll in February found that 70% of Californians believe state and local taxes are too high. The initiative qualified for the November 5, 2024 ballot after organizers affiliated with California-based taxpayer advocacy groups collected more than 1 million signatures. If approved by voters, the initiative would amend the California Constitution to expand the definition of tax to include every charge or fee proposed by lawmakers. It would mandate that all tax increases be approved by a 2/3 majority in the legislature and by a majority of voters.
In a lawsuit against age-based gun restrictions, one judge recently blocked efforts trying to allow young adults to buy rifles in California. Here's NTD's David Lamb with more.
After District Court Judge M. James Lawrence's order, 2 gun restriction laws will remain in effect in California. Anyone under 21 years old are barred from buying certain types of long guns and rifles amid the legal challenge against Senate Bill 1161. The judge said California presented persuasive expert evidence of threats of violence perpetrated by people in that age range. Lorenz wrote, "Since 2020, 18 to 20-year-olds have been involved in several mass shootings. Those shootings have led to the deaths of dozens of children and adults, including the May 22 shootings at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, and a supermarket in Buffalo, New York." The plaintiffs, including Firearms Policy Coalition, are suing California's Attorney General, among others, saying current age-based gun laws violate the Second Amendment rights of individuals between the ages of 18 and 20 by prohibiting access to firearms in common use throughout the United States. According to the Firearms Policy Coalition, more than a dozen U.S. states currently have active federal lawsuits regarding firearms. In Santa Clara, California, David Lamb, NTD News.
San Francisco has a growing homeless population, but surprisingly, the mayor said the majority refuse help and shelter. The rejection has been consistent for 3 months now.
According to a thread on X posted by San Francisco Mayor London Breed, 60% of the homeless people who were offered shelter refused. In November, outreach workers encountered 350 homeless people and offered them services and shelter. 117 accepted shelter, 20 were already housed, and 213 refused to accept help or move indoors. This is not the first time the majority of the unhoused refused help. According to Breed, in October, 65% refused, and in September, 60% declined help. She said workers will continue to offer shelter, in addition to 300 more beds that just opened. They are also trying to get people into treatment by implementing new conservatorship laws. The goal is to keep public streets clean and safe. But one of the challenges the city has in getting the homeless into shelters is the lack of available beds. In addition, most of the shelters are temporary, usually for 30 days. This means if an individual cannot find permanent housing within that time frame, they end up on the streets again. Others simply choose not to go for personal reasons.
A battle of not just homeless and unaffordable homes. We look at the iconic city of Santa Cruz, known for its laid-back beach destinations. The city could see thousands of new homes built within the next decade to meet state requirements. NTD's David Lamb reports.
California cities and towns like Santa Cruz are set to get a makeover, developing more housing units.
The state of California is in charge of every city and every county's land use plans now.
In October 2023, California's governor signed a set of bills to strengthen housing laws, expediting construction and affordability. Along with that, every city is to follow the housing element and required to build their, quote, fair share of housing. The 60,000 resident Santa Cruz has plans for multiple projects, including an 8-story apartment building and figuring out where to build 3,736 units in the next 8 years amid current projects. Fred Keeley, mayor of Santa Cruz, tells NTD the city's trying to protect neighborhoods and instead increase the density and height of urban downtown.
The idea of where do you put 4,000 units in the city of Santa Cruz is the top of mind question. You spread that out in those 4,000 units out into every neighborhood, you're going to be having 4, 5, 6-story apartments all over neighborhoods in Santa Cruz, and the voters aren't going to put up with that.
He doesn't want any building taller than 12 stories downtown.
I think we should put 18 or 1,900 of those 4,000 units downtown. And I think 20% of that, after density bonuses, needs to be affordable.
Unfortunately, a 2023 report claimed that the coastal town has the highest rate of state homelessness. Despite this, its homeless population reduced by 29% from last year, according to the mayor, by providing shelter, services, food and assistance, and no longer permitting any large unsanctioned camps. Regardless, some oppose the construction, saying it changes the laid-back culture of the town, known for surfing and tourism. Survey results from the Public Policy Institute of California say in July, 55% of California adults want easing of land and environmental restrictions to support housing. 59% said they want the state to require local regions to build a fair share of affordable housing. Recently, the city of La Cañada Flint Ridge in Southern California faced backlash from the Attorney General and Governor Newsom for denial of its housing project. One Santa Cruz resident believes construction in the area is a good thing, with retention of residents in the town.
there is an affordability crisis, and everybody's aware of it, and there's a lot of construction that needs to happen in the northern part of the Monterey Bay, and this is a good thing, I think. It's going to be maybe a little bit tough in terms of downtown parking. There's already a lot of demand, but I think it'll be good for the city, and also it'll bring in revenue, which will help with, reconstructing roads and keeping buildings up to date.
In addition to state housing requirements set in place since 1969, California's new legislation allows institutions like colleges and religious organizations to use their property for housing. In Santa Cruz, California, David Lamb, NTD News.
Now let's take a look at what's happening in the world of sports. NTD's Tyler Castillo has the latest on the NBA players' suspension.
The NBA has suspended Draymond Green indefinitely after hitting Yusuf Nurkic in the face during a play in which Green had his arms tied up around Nurkic's body. Green then swung around to break free, striking Nurkic in the face. The length of the suspension is currently indefinite and is the result of repeated misconducts and suspensions from Green's past, said Joe DeMars, who is the executive vice president and head of basketball operations. The suspension takes place immediately, and he can return to play when he meets certain criteria from the league and the Golden State team. The last player to be suspended indefinitely was Gilbert Arenas, which resulted in a 50-game suspension in 2010.
That's all we've got for you tonight. We would like you to join us again on NTD Tonight every weekday at 9 p.m. I'm David Zhang. Have a wonderful evening.